So you know Josh
I'm aware.
Borman.
Looking right at him.
Yeah. He likes baseball.
Yes.
The Mets specifically.
Yeah. And this is not a Mets movie. What team is it?
They're not real.
Okay. It's a fake team. The Washington Senators. I know they're real. I was just making a joke because they were very bad.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I know baseball. Okay.
We haven't revealed the setup for this yet.
So I was talking to Josh. I was like, oh yeah, it's like The Natural. And Josh was like, oh yeah, what's that? Is that a movie? It's the baseball movie.
It's like the baseball movie.
It is.
It's my mom's favorite movie besides Bull Durham, and it's sort of like it's like on par for her with that.
Does your mom only watch baseball movies?
Pretty much exclusively, yeah.
What are her thoughts on
At first she had like an
really loves
awakening.
Redford.
She had an awakening seeing Kevin Costner on the screen, and then she was like, okay, I'm going to watch all the other Kevin Costner movies, and they're all baseball movies.
I was going to say, what are her thoughts on Field of Dreams?
Love of the Game, Dances with Wolves, it's all baseball.
Yellowstone.
Yep, it's all baseball. Every part of it.
Yeah. Here's the thing: no one's ever watched Yellowstone, so no one could ever disprove us. Well, no one that listens to this podcast has ever seen an episode of Yellowstone.
All right, this is your chance, Yellowstone fans.
Wait a second, guys. I have seen Yellowstone.
Have you?
Oh.
I lived with my parents for like a year and change.
That's fair. I have a friend on it,
and-
Jefferson White.
Good for
him.
Okay. And
He's great.
What's interesting is like this is the most boomer show, right? Like this is an extremely boomer show. We live in the West, right?
No, we don't. We live in New York, Brian.
Meaning me and my family lived in the West. There we go. Whatever.
How the West was won.
How the West was fun.
How the West was lived in by Brian and his parents.
Taylor Sheridan's Mary-Kate and Ashley series is really phenomenal. But
It is actually, unironically.
my dad, who is the target audience for Taylor Sheridan programming, has even lived in Tulsa for a number of years. Can't stand a fucking piece of it. None of it. He hates all of it. He's like, I tried to watch Yellowstone. I tried twice to watch Yellowstone. I hate it.
So, AJ, you have not watched Yellowstone.
I've seen a single clip of my friend in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Josh hasn't seen The Natural.
Josh, you should really watch it. It's a great movie.
It's a
really good
soaringly
movie.
romantic, highly revisionist of its source material movie about baseball. Charlie Brown, it's his favorite movie. And I know how much you love.
Charlie Brown from Peanuts?
Yeah, the comic strip character.
That's like he canonically...
Yeah.
Loves The Natural.
Yeah, he loves big naturals.
He loves
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast that loves big naturals. I'm the worst of all
Let's
possible
go, buddy.
AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes, and this week we are not talking about The Natural, despite what our intro may have led you to believe.
No.
Instead, we are back at it for another case study in the pop culture of a dying empire. This
Which
one,
empire?
The Elizabethan Empire.
But which other empire?
Well, yeah, Rome.
Well, it's an ascending empire. It's a dying republic.
There you go.
So
Okay,
we
there
are
you
back
go.
at it. We are back at it again in those white
Vans.
sandals.
There we are.
Sandals. Because we're talking about...
Julius Caesar?
Yeah! This is a Josh episode. I wanted to introduce
Or as
it.
they
Oh,
like
okay,
to
got it.
write it out in Latin, Iv lives
Yeah,
Caesar.
that's true.
Jehovah starts with an I.
That's actually what the horror movie version of this is Eve lives.
Good one. So this week...
Got Brian.
We wanted to, go back to the well of Shakespeare. And
Because
before-
we're theater boys.
That's right. So before you stop listening, before
Happy Pride?
before you
Yeah.
turn that dial, Happy Pride.
We're trying to appeal to marble statue Twitter.
Oh yeah, Logic guys.
Oh
Yeah.
no!
We're returning to tradition.
Real Brutus type.
That's right.
Yeah.
The quartering. Hello.
no, pull up.
So anyway, yeah, this is Julius Caesar, one of Shakespeare's, I would say, less appreciated plays. Oftentimes when you sort of talk about his great works, you talk about Hamlet, you talk about Macbeth, you talk
Yeah.
about, in some cases, if you're talking about his histories, the Henriad,
Yeah.
But generally speaking, as far as tragedies go, Julius Caesar is not really one of those plays that comes to the fore when you're thinking about Shakespeare's best.
So you guys didn't study this in school, in high school?
Julius Caesar?
College for me. I studied in college.
Yeah, you didn't do... What
No.
Shakespeare's did you cover in high school?
So we did Romeo and Juliet,
Of course,
definitely.
yeah.
We did Hamlet, and then my
okay.
senior year we did Twelfth Night, but it was a Catholic school, so we weren't allowed to discuss any of the sex jokes. And I'm like, that's all it is. there's nothing else here. What do you want?
Yeah,
what do you want?
The only one that I remember doing in high school was what's the one where there's the movie with Keanu Reeves and they get nude?
Oh, Much Ado About
Much
Nothing.
Ado About Nothing,
Machado.
thank you.
Yes.
I just couldn't
That's
find it for
also
some reason.
the one I remember Josh Sawyer was tweeting about it. I was like, oh, you got to check out. It's like towards the end of the movie when they're getting like the final wedding ready. There is an extra that just totally eats shit. Like he tries to. I learned this from someone at Calvin. She was like, this is the
that's
best part of the
good.
movie. And it's all I think about now. Like I'm watching that movie waiting for that moment to come. Because it's just this one extra climbing over like a bench at the back of all the rows of benches, and he just falls face first
Hell yes.
onto the ground.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any such moments with extras in this movie, although I wasn't watching.
No, well, I mean,
extras are-
immaculately staged scenes with it.
But Brian, what was your
Yeah,
experience?
that was my second. We did, Romeo and Juliet freshman year. And
Okay, yeah, we did that in 8th grade, I remember. So
yeah, I was in the poorest performing school district in the entire country. So we got to
wow.
it by 9th grade.
All right.
And we did Julius Caesar when I was a sophomore in high school.
Interesting. So what do you remember about it, if anything?
I
from
remember
that
it very
time?
distinctly because I didn't care for, and I still really don't care
Sure.
for Romeo and Juliet. Of course, we watched the Zeffirelli movie. We watched the Baz Luhrmann. We did both
Yeah.
both movies, and I didn't
In a single day, it was
love-
very confusing.
I didn't love both of them, although I did really like Mercutio in both of them.
Correct.
Did in the Zeffirelli one, did they fast forward through the part where we got our tits out, or
Yeah, fully had it written, had the time code written down,
Okay.
stopped
Yeah,
the
yeah,
tape,
yeah.
fast
Look,
forward.
I went to
and played
public
again.
school, and they did that exact same thing for
Okay.
me. So
Yeah.
that wasn't like exclusive to Christian schools.
Yeah. Reading Caesar was like, oh, I actually like this.
okay?
And then we watched this movie that we're going to be talking about mainly today. I could see what was going on here.
Yeah.
I thought it was too descriptive sometimes, where it's like it's too many things that aren't happening on the stage.
Yeah, show me, don't tell me, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
and there is so much talking about something, and I was especially disappointed with the signs and wonders that happen. There's people walking around who are just made out of fire, and it's like in many. This is like the least mystical of Shakespeare's plays. There's like a brief appearance of a ghost.
Yeah.
That says he'll return and then doesn't. But like for the
That actor
most
got
part,
tired, yeah.
for the most part, this is very grounded in its history,
Yeah.
and in the prosaic details as laid out by like Herodotus and everything.
And, well, you see, that's actually very interesting because I think that there's so much of this play that has sort of its grounding in like the world-ending like mysticism of Macbeth, like specifically like the way that a guy comes out, he's like, hey, so there's right after we hear about the assassination attempt, like he's just like, the world is fucking ending. There's like earthquakes, there's fire, there's just like there is this like dread that is like built into the play that I think comes with that otherworldly thing. But for the most part, it's people in rooms talking rhetoric at each other until like huge explosions of violence happen.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that is why I have always found Julius Caesar to be, for me personally, the most interesting play in the canon. Which isn't to say that I think it's his
Not
best.
a Timon head. Not a Timon of Athens head. Not a huge fan of that rhetoric.
So for me, Julius Caesar was not one that I studied in high school. However, it was one that I saw in high school.
Oh, cool.
Because I went to the Stratford Festival in Stratford, Ontario.
Okay.
And saw
Yeah.
a production there. And then I ended up seeing it at Stratford again.
Okay.
And then I saw it in London.
All different productions.
These are all different
It's
productions.
the same production.
They're just remounting it again and again.
And then I saw it in Brooklyn when they brought over the production from the Donmar Warehouse.
Oh, hell yeah.
So,
okay.
and that was with Harriet Walter, who you might know as the Roy's mom in Succession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was excellent, but
And it's the all-female cast, that one.
correct.
Oh, all right.
But what's interesting about this play to me is that I have never seen a production of it that I really consider to be like the production.
Well, that's because you didn't see it at Shakespeare in the Park. when Trump was
We'll get to that later.
We have so much to talk about.
So, but it's
Wow,
interesting.
you've seen it a lot.
Yeah, well, because and to me, it's one of those things where it's like every time I see it, I find something else that's interesting because it has so much to say about sort of the idealism of revolution versus what actually happens when the rubber hits the road. It has a lot to say about masculinity and the nature of male friendships and what that looks like.
Yeah.
It talks about what being a good dad is in a really interesting way. There's like so many little bits and pieces in here that are so interesting to unpack both in part and in whole. And so when we were talking about doing another Shakespeare thing for the show, I think, Brian, you were actually like, hey, there's a Brando film adaptation and it's actually really good.
Yeah, and as we established in the opening to this episode, Josh doesn't know about movies.
Correct.
It's just like how I don't know about music. Josh tried to do more New Order references today, and we're like, sure, Josh, okay. I bet that's funny to most people, just not me.
Brian, how does it feel to treat me like you do?
I bet it does. I bet it does.
I once went on a date where we were texting for a while, and then she had me send her a playlist, and then she said, "We shouldn't do this."
Oh,
because my playlist.
What was on the playlist?
Oh, here's the
Is it
thing.
all Sondheim?
Yeah, I mean a couple,
Except for the cat
Look, this was a
songs.
long time ago. Okay, I didn't know what music was, and I still really don't. But yeah, no, it when you find like something like this version of Julius Caesar, it brings the text alive in a way that I didn't appreciate this play, I don't think, fully until I watched this movie this morning. It brought such clarity to it. Like, this is the clearest Shakespeare adaptation I think I've ever seen.
film adaptation.
Film adaptation. Honestly, no, probably both.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of Shakespeare that I've seen has been very unclear to me.
Okay.
Mostly because I really struggle with
Well, and
the
I think that's
language.
what it was for me too.
Yeah.
When I was 15, I was like, I understand what's happening in this movie, even especially with the fact that they're just talking about shit that's not happening there, which is why like King Lear is a play that I just never want to do because I don't think it's solvable, because everyone's just talking about shit that's happening over there. It's like fucking like 5 scenes about his retinue, and like
They just keep getting smaller, Brian.
and it's like, I get that he's behaving irrationally about his retinue, but I still don't know what they're doing.
So
Just kind of hanging around, getting into fights.
if that's you, if you are sitting to this right now being like, you know, I'm not a big Shakespeare person. This doesn't feel like it's for me. We've included in this episode a lot of clips of the actual movie so that you can listen and see how this language grabs you in the way that it's delivered.
Yeah.
And I hope that you're going to find it to be as engaging and interesting as we did.
Yeah.
So we might as well start by talking about the play itself.
Yes.
Julius Caesar, a tragedy written by one William Shakespeare. Yes,
Yeah,
he was he was a real guy. The people who say that he wasn't a real guy are fucking stupid, and we're going to give you a lot of reasons that he is a real guy.
Yeah,
in this
Julius
episode.
Caesar was definitely a real guy.
Yeah. We have busts.
What's interesting is that we categorize this in the modern day as a history, in the same vein as the Henrys. At least that's how it was taught to me. But and there are a lot of plays that we don't categorize as histories, right? Hamlet, Lear, we don't call them histories,
Right.
but they are given the label in the first publishings as the tragical history of.
Right.
This is not the tragical history of Julius Caesar.
Right.
In the first folio, the page says the tragedy of
Right.
Julius Caesar,
And
which
so,
is interesting.
And so modern Shakespeare scholars also tend to categorize it as a tragedy correctly, because the fact is, Shakespeare was just kind of making shit up. He pretty much knew
He was using sources who were also making shit up.
So, like, he knew the broad strokes of the story, but just to quote the Folger Shakespeare library here, Shakespeare may have written Julius Caesar to be the first of his plays to take the stage at his acting company's new Globe Theater in 1599. At this important point in his career as a playwright, Shakespeare turned to a key event in Roman history. Many people in the Renaissance were passionately interested in the story of Caesar's death at the hands of his friends and fellow politicians. There was much debate about who were the villains and who were the heroes. And so Shakespeare basically took a look at that and was like, hey, I'm going to play around with these themes, these ideas. I am going to ground it in a bunch of things that I just have seen and observed in what I look at when I look at the world. And we're going to make these historical characters resonant in a new way without being super careful about what are the actual details of what really happened.
And it is important to point out that like Shakespeare is writing about a story that people know. Because in the Elizabethan age, people were getting public education, including Shakespeare himself, who was a beneficiary of that system.
Right.
And what public education meant was that you learned Latin.
Yeah.
You just fucking learned Latin all day long at Latin grammar schools. And along the way, you read Virgil and Horace and whatever else.
If you want proof that Shakespeare learned Latin, read Love's Labour's Lost. There's just whole scenes in that are just Latin puns.
Yeah.
And if you ever tried to make those work on stage, you know my pain.
and like the Comedy of Errors is him just adapting Roman comedies into an Elizabethan form.
Sure.
Right.
And we know that there were other Julius Caesar plays at this time. There was one that was even written in Latin.
Oh,
wow.
In like only about 10 or 20 years before this that we don't have anymore.
well, that's because Shakespeare wrote the play.
He wrote the play.
And, you know,
I mean, they were like the Brutus and Cassius plays, and his was the Mark Antony. Like, his was just the guy, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it
took me a second, but I'm with you. Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to try that again? Just
No.
Okay.
We can cut it.
No, I'm keeping it. I was with you.
I was whatever. I'm just seeing you in the edit room tomorrow, Brian. You're like, God damn it.
No, I'm so chill. I have so many days to edit this.
Oh, good. So this particular film adaptation then came out in, what was it, 1953?
It did,
Yeah.
yes. It was 1953, and it lost a shit ton of Oscars the next year in 1954, if anybody's looking it up. But, you know, the big things was like Brando was nominated for this.
Yeah.
It was not up for Best Director, weirdly, but it was up for Best Picture. I think at this point, Joseph Mankiewicz was not really in like the Academy's good graces
That's interesting
anymore.
because the direction is what makes this movie so interesting.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
but he also wrote it too. So like, I feel like a lot of his adaptation choices came to oh boy. But he adapted the Shakespeare. Like it's not because everyone was just like, they were like, well, there were so many reviews at the time. It's like, yeah, the text is completely unedited, and I'm like, this is 2 hours long.
Yeah,
Are you kidding me? Yeah, it's edited.
And that's an important note, is that Julius Caesar in its pure uncut form is like a 3+ hour long play, and they got it down to 2.
And also, if you've ever read Julius Caesar, everyone will remember reading that very confusing scene about Cinna the poet getting attacked and killed by a mob,
Yep, they
as
cut it.
opposed to Cinna the conspirator, which is not in the movie.
Yeah, right. They filmed it, but it was gone. Yeah.
So then in terms of the big players in this, you had mentioned Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
There's a few other great actors, and we'll get to this as we get into the movie itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was received, I would say, well, but maybe not as well as it could have been, should have been. Kind of surprising.
Well, there's an interesting point that Roman movies, if you were making like a sword and sandals picture at this time,
right.
Yeah.
that usually meant you were going for the big budget. You were going to make it in color. And there are associations that
interesting.
people have with the kinds of movies that are made in color, the kinds of movies that are made in black and white. But like, yeah, this would be something you make in color, you give it an intermission, which Joseph Mankiewicz did when he made Cleopatra, which was supposed to be 2 movies, and the producers didn't understand what sequels were. It's fine. It was a huge bomb.
Right.
But they wanted to shoot it in black and white to give it a sense of immediacy. It's an interesting thing because it's like the stereotypes that people walk in with, right? When it's the early 50s, what's going to be a color movie? What's going to be a black and white movie? But they wanted a sense that almost like what a lot of writers ended up doing in the late 50s, writing the You Are There educational film series. They wanted it to sort of feel like a newsreel.
Sure.
Yeah, like a fascist newsreel specifically.
Because, this movie actually opens with a big old eagle that looks
an eagle
a
flag.
whole lot. For a second, I was like, is this going to be about if Julius Caesar were a Nazi? Because that doesn't make sense.
But no, it's like the Roman eagle. But it's like it's not just like an image. It is a waving banner. You kind of see it flowing in the background as the credits are firing up.
There's actually another very practical reason they shot in black and white. It was because Mankiewicz didn't want to be compared with a film called Quo Vadis, which
they stole the sets from.
Which they stole all the sets from, which was in color. And so he was like, I don't want to invite comparisons with that movie. let's put it in black and white,
Yeah.
and it looks completely different.
And
here's
that
the
was a
thing.
much larger profile film.
Sure.
Yeah, and they do
Yeah.
look like completely different films, despite having a lot of the same sets and costumes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I do think there's something interesting there about the immediacy, the way that it grabs you right away. It drops you right into the action from the very beginning. We're just out in, I guess, the town square.
And this is, I believe, these are the actual first lines of the play too.
Yes.
They haven't skipped ahead, but
Yeah.
this is kind of an unusual way that this play starts. This is one of Shakespeare's better first scenes. I've talked about that before. How he has a lot of bad first scenes.
Henry V
but
is interminable.
but like, any Henry.
Yeah.
But like, Hamlet has a great first scene.
Yeah.
And this has a great first scene.
What makes for a good first Shakespeare scene is when it just drops you into the action and it's
Yeah.
like, hey, keep up.
Yeah,
and
some
this
stuff is
does
happening.
exactly that.
No
Yeah.
long speech.
No.
Like-
It's just he works best when there's dread.
Yeah.
When there's just like something bubbling under the surface. And in this case, it's the evils of democracy.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So we got Flavius and Marolus, and these are basically two guys
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
who are still supportive of the previous Caesar. They're not a big fan of Julius.
Pompey was his name.
And so,
Yeah, well, he wasn't really a Caesar. He was a dictator.
right. Yes.
And in modern parlance, this is a little confusing because dictator was not a super powerful role. It was an executive role that you did for a year. You were elected by the Senate. You were subservient to the Senate, but it allowed you to make some choices, and then you were out of that role. And so one of the big things that Caesar does when he comes back from all of his campaigns and he builds up all the support and crosses the Rubicon, etc., is he declares himself dictator for life.
Right. And this is something that Flavius and Marolus are very concerned about because they still remember Pompey, the previous guy, and they found him to be a great and effective leader and one who held himself above the public in a
Yeah.
way that Julius does not.
Yeah, Gaius Julius Caesar is a fucking populist in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
And people love him. They don't
Yeah.
they don't necessarily fear him. They kind of love him. They're
Yeah,
like,
they dig him.
Oh, he's my
Yeah.
guy. Like we're out here having a
You can get a
party
beer with
today.
him, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. He's speaking across certain class divides, right?
Right.
Because there are levels of participation that are allowed for different classes. If you're an equestrian, you can do this, but not this, right? If you're nobility, you can be part of the Senate. You can be a dictator. You can't, be over here. And then there's just a bunch of people who are fucked.
So this play does have a little bit of an issue where it's like you got Flavius and Marolus and you think they're going to stick around and matter. They don't. They're
No.
just there in the beginning to like set the table for you, but that's okay
And
because
they instantly get killed.
Yeah.
well, right, because they're
Bad-mouthing Caesar.
bad-mouthing Caesar, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
And then Caesar comes in as he sort of walks in through the gate. A mysterious soothsayer arrives.
Look upon Caesar.
What sayst thou to me now? Speak once again.
Beware the Ides of March.
He is a dreamer. Let us leave him.
Pass! Pass!
Great fucking score on this movie.
Wouldn't that be so fun? Like you just go to a parade. Like that's what I'm going to do as an old man. I'm going to walk to, all the parades that happen these days. There's a parade, there's like 2 a day, right?
Yeah, ticker tape. All
You just
over the
get
place.
to you just get to walk up to one with a big cane that makes a lot of noise
a lot of bells on it.
and
yeah.
then just say a sooth or two
Yeah,
and
we love saying
ruin
sooth.
everyone's day.
That's right.
Yeah. What's very funny about the soothsayer is that he is a blind man who has this cane.
Yeah.
And refuses to use it.
Yeah.
He puts his hands out in front of him and like, you have a walking stick, my
Yeah.
guy.
And do you think, as far as class, I'm always a little like, is he just some guy who lives out in the wilderness, or is he a citizen? Is he a citizen with a cane?
Good question, Brian.
Yeah.
But yes, this soothsayer, he has now made this horrible premonition of something bad is going to happen on the Ides of March.
Yeah. Turns out it's a deadly premonition.
Thank you for picking
We
that one
can't
up.
tease it. We can't tease it and then not do it, Brian.
But yes,
Well, maybe we will do it. We're gonna do this for years, folks.
yeah, we got time. We're playing the long game.
But the Ides of March corresponding with, it's the 15th of March, basically.
Yes.
March
Yes.
15th,
Yeah.
the Ides. But yeah, you got to be aware of it, right?
Yeah.
And Caesar...
I love being aware of Ides.
Yeah, same. Caesar pretty immediately tenses up from this. He's pretty freaked out. And so too is his wife Calpurnia. and his main squeeze, Antonius, Mark Antony, played by an unbelievably attractive Marlon Brando.
Yes.
This was Marlon Brando in his absolute. I mean, this was like the third movie he did.
Yeah, this was Brando does Streetcar, right? And basically reinvents acting as we know it in the United States. He is a
What year was that, Streetcar?
It was 1951. So this was 2 years later. In between Streetcar and this, he did Brownface in a movie that was sort of, he played a Mexican revolutionary.
Yeah,
which
Viva
is-
Zapata. Yeah.
Yeah, which is
It's an interesting movie, honestly, but he plays Emiliano Zapata himself.
Okay.
Yeah. Real rough. But he basically reinvents acting, right? He is an acolyte of Stella Adler, is sort of his main person, even though Strasberg would go on for years to try and claim him as one of his own. Brando was 100% an Adler kid across the board. There's something, especially about Kowalski, like there was something he had to prove with Caesar.
Yeah.
Because when he did Streetcar, all the reviews were like, look, there's a raw intensity to this. Like it seems to be like this new like revolution of actor who are just like these like masculinity incarnate, like this sort of raw emotion that's just beaming out of their faces. But he's a little mumbly.
So many
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.